What was once thought to be Europe's oldest known battle may in fact have been a massacre. Not a clash of organised armies, but a brutal assault on innocent traders and merchants carrying their wares down one of the ancient trade routes of northern Europe. As always, there's more to this than meets the eye. Let's see if we can dig a bit deep. I'm Michael Bott.
And I'm Rupert Soskin.
We're the Prehistory guys, as usual, bringing you news about old stuff. Or in this case, bringing you news about old stuff. Fact is that we're updating on something that changed, a perception that was changed in 2020. So we're a bit 4 years behind the times on this, but I don't think that many people out there know about this reinterpretation of the so-called Tollense Valley or Tollense River battle. First of all, I think we need to talk about, the original interpretation of what was there, how it was found, and all the rest of it in the original interpretation. Rupert, what do you got on that? Where should we start?
On the original interpretation, well, it was so we're talking about what was thought to be a battle that took place approximately 3,250 years ago, and it's about 80 miles north of Berlin. This battle site in the Tollense Valley, and basically, they've excavated over 20,000 disarticulated bones, which are calculated to come from 140-ish different people. But the extrapolation from, because if it was a battle situation, then they calculate how many people percentage-wise are likely to die in a battle situation. And so they extrapolated that this could have been a battle where up to 1,400 people died. Now, one of the fascinating aspects of this is that isotopes showed that people came from far and wide to this place. It wasn't a battle between local people. And so the interpretation at the time was this coming together of a vast army of people to fight over this. It's a bridge over the river or a fording point over the river. And so the interpretation that it was a battle over ownership, if you like, of or territorial aspect over this particular part of the river valley. Further interpretations, because of more analysis that has gone on, laboratory analysis that has gone on with these bones, and weapons and all the other aspects that were found at the site, have really introduced a completely different interpretation, which is much more fascinating and does make an awful lot more sense from the findings, really. So I think that's a précis of where we were originally.
Yeah. But a little detail maybe, because I think it's important to mark out the starting point from this. It was 1996 that an amateur archaeologist, I don't know what sort of survey he was conducting, but came across the upper arm bone sticking out of the mud down there by the river, which had a flint arrowhead stuck in the upper part of it, which is a bit of a giveaway, really, is that something unusual happened here. So that was the original sparking point. It has to be said also, I think even prior to that, through dredging in the area, that a couple more skulls had been found. So it was known that there was stuff going on there, but no clue as to the nature of it. And I think it was this arm with the flint arrowhead stuck in it that really perked stuff up. So it was, I think, not until 2006 that I think they did some interrogative pits, dug some preliminary pits to, and which did turn up more bones, and then they really got going in 2006, and it's the results of the ongoing excavations from 2006 that gave this portrayal of two mass armies coming together. And I should also say that the original excavator, the original guy in charge of the excavations, Dr. Janssen, or is it Janssen?
I don't know. I think it's Janssen, but I don't know.
Yes, who originally interpreted this as a battle scene with large numbers of people on each side. And it is him that has now changed his mind a bit, and we'll go into that a bit later on. So when this came out, that Dr. Janssen said that this was definitely a battle, that peeled back the veil a bit on an assumption that the later Bronze Age, in this time, we're talking 1250 approx BC, had been a peaceful place. There wasn't really, hitherto, there was no evidence directly of violence of any sort. More towards Central Europe and around, yes, people owned swords and items of warfare, but the actual proof of them actually having been put to use was there was no evidence at all. And so this became the first evidence, direct evidence, of actual conflict taking place at this time, which hitherto had been thought of as quite an idyllic sort of period in human history.
Yes,
as tin and bronze and amber and stuff began to be traded all over the place. Some kind of a golden age. But I think this discovery and this interpretation certainly turned that on its head. So a great deal of fuss was made about it at the time. It's an incredibly important discovery as far as this period in time is concerned.
It really is, and it's ironic, really, that actually one of the details that was pinpointing or pointing towards this not being a battle per se was that lots of weapons were found, so arrowheads, for example, and things like that, but almost no swords at all. So clearly the people who had been killed were not warriors. They weren't people who wielded swords. The swords had gone with the people who'd done the killing and disappeared, which is, little details like that really did begin to paint a very different picture. There's quite a few like that.
The human remains that have been discovered have all been in within the bounds of where the river was or where it is now. None of the remains have been found in the flat areas of the valley around the river. So that's something to keep in mind. And an interpretation has been, seeing as all the remains are down the thread of the river, that the battle or the conflict took place at a place upstream near the battle took place near the crossing, and that all the remains we have, due to interpreting their disarticulation, etc., is a result of bodies being washed downstream after the event, in the years after the event. So we've got this long string of human remains in or around the river, trailing 1.5 kilometres downstream from the point at which the crossing seems to have been made. Have you got any facts about the other material stuff that was found with the apart from flint arrowheads, etc.?
Well, in terms of goods, there was an awful lot of high quality bronze goods were amongst there. In fact, it's. I don't have a list of the of all the artifacts found. Have you made a note of those? Because it's interesting that what I do know is that everything they had found was high quality, and it was quite varied. So these are, and the fact that the isotopes of the isotope analysis of the people showed that they came from a very, very wide area.
Yeah.
This leading to the interpretation, this was a travelling market almost. This was a caravan.
Well, that was that. Well, that was. I mean, thinking back to when we first came upon this, the Battle of Tollense Valley or whatever it was, the feeling was very strongly that these were two organised armies that had come together at this point. There wasn't any suggestion of a travelling market or anything like that.
No. So various things adding to that. One of them in particular was that if this was a meeting of two armies, then why are there a significant number of women and children found amongst the dead? That didn't make a lot of sense.
You need to qualify significant, but I mean, it's their very presence. So that it's not that there are large numbers in the remains, but they are present. And enough to sit up and pay attention to it. Now, I'm thinking about the oddities of. There are gold spirals, which some have interpreted as hair braiding things. So let your imagination go with those, but also spiral rings of tin, and spiral rolls of bronze, which don't seem to have any ornamentation purpose to them, and those have been interpreted now as ingots of some kind, used for the transportation of raw materials. So that's the other point to make in the context of the whole period, that we're on or very near to very important trade routes that stretched all over Central and Northern Europe, and of course right down to the Mediterranean at the time. Because let's remember the other stuff that was going on at the time, like we've got the sack of Troy sort of around about this time. The Mycenae conflagrations kicking off. That's just a chronological context. But otherwise, in terms of material culture, it's really quite rich as far as Central Europe is concerned. We've both seen the stuff that was on display at the Stonehenge exhibition, the World of Stonehenge exhibition at the British Museum. There's fabulous stuff from Central Europe, gold items, bronze, etc., and quite culturally definitive. The cultures that were there at the time, that's another conversation entirely. But the point is that was a huge transfer of goods. Tin from Cornwall would either come down the west coast, or across down where we are here, near the bottom of the Baltic Sea. And of course, you got amber coming from the Baltic, down these kinds of routes, down through Central Europe, and distribution into the rest, and particularly in the Northern Mediterranean and beyond. So it's a busy, busy time. Got to put, this probably wasn't. There's probably a little bit of a wilderness, but hardly a last outpost. People would be familiar with traversing the landscape. So we said enough about why it was thought to be a battle in the first place. There are loads of other details, I think. Other than that, what we've also mentioned is the fact that there were horses in the remains of horses amongst the remains of the dead from battle.
Yes,
so it's another thing to keep in mind.
That's something to keep in mind. I think another very interesting aspect as well is that there were a small number of males who had healed injuries. So many of the injuries weren't. So it seemed like most people had been they'd died from their wounds, but there was a small percentage of the males who had healed wounds. So the interpretation of that quite sensibly is that this small number of people were warriors of some description, and it could have been that they were if you like, the hired guards. They were the mercenaries who protected these traders as they took all their valuable goods, whatever distance across the landscape. I mean, they were traveling a significant distance, so you wouldn't carry large value, high value goods with you without some sort of protection. If you're a market trader, you're probably not going to be the best fighter if you're set upon by brigands, really.
Absolutely. You mentioned numbers, and I think it's worthwhile just paying a little bit of attention to the reasoning behind the fact that originally it was thought that this was a battle between what would have been, for the time, massed armies. And it's not that the evidence is direct from that, but has been worked out from the number of individuals that they found down through excavation, and projecting that to say what the size, the total number of dead, because they assume that they haven't excavated the total number of dead, and then from that going beyond, projecting beyond that to estimate the size of the army. Now, I think we both think, hindsight's easy, isn't it? And I think that probably those involved are probably retracting from this. But the rule of thumb was their calculation from the number of individuals, which is 140. They have the remains from 140 odd individuals, and they're saying, well, we've only excavated a small percentage of the total site. Therefore, we estimate to find upwards of 750 individuals, to 1,000 individuals if we could excavate the whole area. And then projecting that further, when you take, a rough rule of thumb, that if you get a heightened conflagration like this, that the number of people that perish on each side is roughly 20% of the total number of the combatants, then you project that to, you can project that up to 4,000 people. Now, I think there are probably, with hindsight, and with the gift of this new interpretation, that there may be some fallacies in the assumptions made to get those projected numbers. So. That said, I think it's probably
if you've got a team of if you've got a caravan of traders, they're not going to be fighting back so much, are they? I mean, they're going to want to, but it completely changes how those numbers would be interpreted and calculated. So,
I think there's one particular detail of the research that's been done since on the bones that have been recovered that maybe has launched the new interpretation of what happened at Tollense. And that is that the research into the remains of the dead have revealed that some of the people had skeletal deformations that could only have been brought out by a lifetime of carrying heavy loads. Yeah? And that kind of goes partway to explaining why among the 1,200 human remains that are buried at the site from 145 different people, there are women and children as well as the men. So I think that's the kind of big switcheroo that probably happened.
Yeah, it's a fascinating detail.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. And with that complexion on things, then all the other details can be made sense, and a wholly different narrative can be put on the whole situation. And because we were mystified, we did a thing about Tollense, and it was always a thing. Well, how do you get armies arranging from hugely different distances and in huge numbers in what is a relatively uninhabited area anyway? There's only a few small settlements, as far as we know, dotted about. This is quite an empty area. Where do these people come from? How are they organised to get together in this spot? And why?
That was the big one, wasn't it? It's the why, because you had this interpretation of an almost Lord of the Rings, the whole of the world is coming together against Mordor. Why do you have people from Southern Europe getting together with people from Eastern Europe to come and fight at a single point? It was the stuff that fairy tales are made of, really. So to have this research really make sense of that is a complete game changer, isn't it?
Yeah. There's another point as well along the same lines that there were, as I mentioned earlier, there were horse bones found amongst the other remains, and these have always been interpreted as warhorses of some kind. That there was this was warriors on horseback knocking 7 bells out of each other. But it turns out, upon further examination, that these were juvenile horses. These are the bones of juveniles, which you wouldn't use as if you were riding into battle. It much more suggests that these horses were to be traded, that these were part of a train, and the horses, if not, well, even if they were juveniles, they would be less likely to be beasts of burden or traction. They'd be more likely that these were animals that were being moved to be traded. So there's that complexion as well, which points in the other direction. So all that in place, and I think that's most of the stuff we can throw at it within the purview of a short examination like this. What in your mind, if you were to paint the picture that puts in your mind, what would it? How would it come out?
Oh, it just the vision of this caravan of traders with all their staff, coming together to, was it an annual thing? Did they, did they go to the biggest market in that region over there somewhere every year? It just made complete sense of that, and in your head you can just see them traveling along what we know is a meeting of the Amber Road and the Silk Road. Everything goes through that point where we know the trading has been going on for so long. It's very evocative.
It opens my mind, certainly, because I'd never appreciated that trade in that time in the same way that you would put a ship to sea in order to trade and bring back goods from foreign parts. If the sea was a bit of an impediment, then the equivalent of sending a ship out to foreign parts to bring back goods, the caravan is the land-borne ship. It's got all the things that you need to carry with you. A large enough group of people, self-sustaining people, to travel over thousands of miles there and wherever it is and back. And the need for that traveling troop to be protected. It's like, you'd have something approaching a small town on the move.
You really would.
In order to get these goods there and back. And the fact that the strontium analysis from the teeth that they have place some of these people in Central Europe, I think, but that group is more spread out. So I can imagine, being in a caravan is not for everybody. So you'd get people from diverse regions coming together to be employed in a caravan. So that makes sense of the southern aspect of where people came from the isotope analysis. And the other group of people are much more localized. They seem to come from somewhere much nearer and in a much tighter area, much nearer to the site of the battle. So in my imagination, I've got this huge caravan moving through the landscape that ambushed by a very well armed, large-ish group that's probably been commissioned by some lord or warlord, to assail this caravan and take its goods, most likely on the return journey.
Yeah.
Because their goods, if they're carrying tin, they would most likely to be carrying tin from Cornwall, so so further from the west and the north, and and other goods. So the almost certainly on the return journey, traveling south along the route. Yeah. There's much more detail to put
there
on
is.
that.
You could see it either way, though, couldn't you? That you could be stopping the caravan while they've stored all their goods before they've sold them. But but either way, it's also very telling that they didn't find any wagons, because why would there be wagons in the river? They'd have taken those. That's why.
Also the wood would have tended to have disappeared. Yeah.
But they did find the clubs, didn't they?
Yes, that's right.
So
yes,
there
right.
were a couple of different styles of clubs. One style is baseball bat shaped, and the other is more like a hockey stick.
Made of blackthorn, the same stuff that the Irish shillelaghs made.
Yes, and the root stock is extremely tough. Yeah. Do you know there is one real enigma that remains, and that's that there's no trace of any of the human remains being scavenged, and that's a really intriguing aspect, because if people are just left to rot in a field, if you like, well then carrion have had a go. Of foxes, wolves, whatever will have taken, bears will have taken part of it. There's no sign of scavenging on any of the bones. So that's...
Glad you mentioned that.
Well, it's raised ideas, hasn't it, about, was it flooding? Was it the amount of people being killed in the river that actually made a backlog of water that covered them all with mud or whatever? Don't know.
Yeah.
It's an intriguing aspect.
Well, I think no. Well, yes. The implication in my mind is that the people that fell in the river or were deposited in the river were less likely to be scavenged. But also, I think if they were in the river, then they were less likely to have been robbed after the event. Hence, the people in the rivers do still have some of their goods with them. Otherwise, you'd assume they'd be robbed. So, in my mind, what's happened is that there's this conflagration around the point where the causeway crosses the river or thereabouts. And a number of people have been deposited in the river. Those that weren't have been either robbed for their goods, or their goods been taken away. And the body's probably scavenged and taken away by animals anyway after the event. We will never know if the people that didn't get deposited into the river, how they were taken care of, whether they were taken away to be given decent cremations or burials if they were warriors, or just left where they were. We'll probably never know that. But I'm glad you mentioned it, because it speaks to the point of the extrapolation of the numbers to get the large numbers. And I think that although, 140-odd individuals still remaining in the river, I suspect that accounts for quite a large percentage of the total. Rather than, I don't think...
Yeah.
that they'll find that many bodies in the rest scattered all about.
Yeah, I think the figures calculated are... I think in my humble opinion, I think the numbers would be much lower. Yeah,
I think so too. So that's a scalar thing to bring into mind. Although this would have been a large caravan, it's not a large army. The numbers of people being involved, I think, are probably much smaller than have hitherto thought. And I think we've about said as much as we can about the Battle of Tollense River or Tollense Valley.
I think we have.
Yeah. So I hope that little bit of old new news, or is it new old news?
Yes, new interpretations of old news. That's the one.
Yeah. I hope it's given you some food for thought and, a seed for the imagination. It's certainly done that for me. And I tell you what it's also done for us. I think it opened the door a bit to looking into this period of history. I know there's probably, as ever, lifting the corner of the carpet, all sorts of things run out and think, oh, Lord, too much, I can't cope. But it's a rich period in history of turbulence and change, and hopefully we'll get around to covering more of that in times to come. But for the moment, anyway, it's time to say bye-bye and thank you for watching. Do have a look at our Patreon page. Please do have a look at our Buy Me a Coffee page and look at supporting our GÖBEKLI TEPE to Stonehenge project. We'd be much obliged. That's an ongoing project, by the way. Do have a look. So, goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me. See you next time.
Bye-bye. Are you stopping your recording now?
I'm stopping my recording.
Well done.
I'm stopping my audio.